welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have two amazing guests to introduce to you now. Maleen Avery and Anna Paulich are Rebel Nutrition, a weight loss physician and registered holistic nutritionist duo. They empower women to take control of their weight and metabolic health by unforking their relationship with food. I love that, unforking, that's great. With 13 years of experience as a doctor and 6 years of experience as a nutritionist, Maleen and Anna were very familiar with all of the typical doctor-recommended ways to lose weight. As those recommendations failed, they found another route to success. When they rejected the standard advice, they both lost a combined 100 pounds. Today, they have helped thousands of others lose weight, regain their control of their relationship with food, and feel confident and energetic. Ladies, what a pleasure. Welcome to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks for having us. We're so excited to be here.
This is the first time I've ever been able to interview two people at once, so I'm a little intimidated. Just make sure you take it easy on me today.
We will.
We'll be nice.
I hope so. It was really interesting learning about you and what you do. I followed you on social media for quite a while, but chasing you down on the website for your clinic is so interesting to me. Frequently asked questions. I go to that page, and the first one that pops up is, how much is this going to cost me? And the answer is nothing. It's just for free. It's just how Canadian healthcare is. What about supplements and stuff like that? Like, yeah, we don't really sell any supplements, or like weight loss surgeries. Like, yeah, we don't even do that. Like, explain to me how that can not cost anything. I'm down in America. We have to pay for everything.
Yeah, Casey, this is the nature of our healthcare system in Canada. It's a publicly funded system, but there's always going to be limits to our system, right? What it can cover. And I think even some Canadians don't really know what it all entails. But basically, any service that's delivered by a doctor is covered. The government pays for it from our taxes. And so, there's some limits on what we can deliver. So when I prescribe, medications or follow people with their blood work and things like that, give them some advice, that's all covered. But if you're looking for things like health coaching or something more in depth to get you a really deep transformative change, you kind of have to go outside of the healthcare system, at least in Canada.
Wow, interesting. How do people feel about that? I'm just curious if it's like a Denmark situation where they've got some of the highest taxes in the world, but nobody really cares because they know they're always covered.
I think people, this is kind of our national identity. We have the public health care. People like it, but they also get frustrated with it, right? Because you can't get everything covered. So things like nutritionists or dietitians, athletic therapists, physiotherapists, things like that are not covered. And so you either have to have your own kind of insurance program that will pay for that, or you pay out of pocket for those things. So there are limits. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say, those, allied healthcare professionals are still something that you have to pay for. But I always say, you know what, you get what you pay for, unless you're seeing Dr. Avery, of course.
That's right.
But, she does go above and beyond in her practice, which is what you've seen on the website. But aside from that, there are other healthcare systems that have public and private funding, right? And often the people in those countries, like Mexico, for example, will say you get what you pay for, right? So
very interesting. Huh. Wow. So cool. Yes. And I can tell you guys go above and beyond. The ratings and reviews were just all of them raving reviews. You guys are Rebel Nutrition, which is an interesting name. That shouldn't be a thing, right? Like, we should be able to just listen to our nutritional guidelines and just follow them and be okay with those. So I want to unpack that story, but I want to know how the two of you started, Rebel Nutrition and how that all became a thing.
Yeah, so we were actually working together in a clinic last year prior to COVID, and I was running the nutrition program for the clinic, and Maleen was the lead physician there. And, we got to know each other, and we realized that for us both, we really used the same approach and believed in the true science behind what we were practicing. That weight was not the problem in the client's journey. And having our own similar journeys as we discussed, our weight loss and how we lost a combined 100 pounds, as you mentioned. We just seen a lot of similarities, and we also, of course, finish each other's sentences. So
yeah, we're essentially twins.
Well, I was going to say when you have the right combination of people, it's a 1 + 1 = 3, right? Like there's a synergy there. So what things do you guys bring out of each other that's really helpful?
Yeah, you know what? Like we both love to learn. And I think that's one thing is like we realized we're both like we're nerds in disguise because we actually look really cool. But so we love to learn. We're continuously learning, studying the science, having, healthy debates with people about it. And we just love spreading the message and transforming people's lives. And that's where we find the value for ourselves, right? And we're passionate about it. It's not just a job. It's not just, something we stumbled upon and just feel like doing, but we really are passionate about this.
And I think we both had that rebellious nature because both of us, to get any sort of results, had to go outside of the traditional healthcare model, right? Mm-hmm. We kind of had to do the opposite of what the guidelines tell us in order to lose that 100 pounds. And it's not only the 100 pounds that we lost, right? Like we had incredible results. I resolved some longstanding hip pain. Anna had a lot of other health issues that she resolved through the power of nutrition. So it was quite incredible.
Wow. I would love to hear each one of your stories. It sounds like you kind of found this way of eating and this lifestyle kind of independently and then came together afterwards. But it's interesting that you say, this reignited your passion for work because, Maleen, you almost quit from what I read.
Yeah, I almost quit. I had one foot out of the door. I actually enrolled in a fashion design diploma a couple of years ago because I was like, I can't stand this anymore. And so this is like where our health care system kind of falls apart is that, you're kind of stuck in the system. Everything moves at a snail's pace. You can't give the patients, 100% of the care that they need, right? So I used to be a sports medicine physician. And the big issue for me was, let's say I had a patient with a rotator cuff tear. I knew clinically they had one and they needed to get it repaired by an orthopedic surgeon. But in Canada, it takes about 9 months to get an MRI, right? And that's required for the surgeon to see them. I get the MRI and about 1 to 2 years later is when they see the orthopedic surgeon. And by that time, their rotator cuff is, it's atrophied and it's full of fat, right? Fatty infiltration of the muscle and it's non-repairable.
Wow.
And so that was like one of the examples. The other thing is about, hip and knee replacements take years in Canada to get, right? So it's like, how do you manage these patients in the meantime, right? They need the surgery. They're off work. They're disgruntled. They're unhappy and they're in pain. And so that was the big kind of issue for me trying to practice sports medicine. My practice actually became a nutrition practice because I stumbled upon low carb for myself. Which helped me immensely. And I started using it in my practice to treat chronic pain. And so, that's what people would do. They'd change their nutrition. They'd maybe do a little bit of intermittent fasting. The pain would get better. And then a side effect would be they'd lose 100 pounds, come off of their cholesterol medication, come off their diabetes medication. I thought, this is insane. And this is kind of why I got into weight loss medicine.
You mentioned you kind of stumbled across this. Do you remember what it was that you saw? Like what first caught your attention? Was it like a book or an article and when that was?
Yeah, this was, I can't even remember. Time is blurring for me, but this was a few years ago. I was utterly frustrated that I couldn't lose 45 pounds. I tried every single diet and supplement out there. I came across a Facebook group of female physicians who had started low carb. And I kind of creeped them for a good year before I dabbled in it myself. And it worked. And it's not even the weight loss that I found. It was kind of the mental clarity that I got and the hip pain that got better. And I just felt more energetic and I was better able to show up as a mom and a physician. I thought this was the most incredible medicine, really, that was out there.
Wow. What a great story. That's so cool. Anna, how about you? How did you come across low carb?
Well, again, like Maleen, I was, on the diet roller coaster throughout my whole life. So, even when I thought I was overweight, I actually wasn't overweight until I was overweight. But later in life, I had issues with my thyroid and then infertility. So I actually ended up in an out of province fertility clinic. And part of the initial intake, the physician there had said, you know what, you should really change your nutrition and try a low carb diet, essentially. So he had some resources he gave me, and I thought, oh, what's wrong with my diet? I'm eating healthy. I'm eating lots of fruits and vegetables. So what could be wrong with that? But I thought, what's he even talking about? I had never heard about it. So I started, of course, like I said, I love to learn. So I was down the rabbit hole of the internet, reading everything about low carb and how it could affect fertility, and came across, insulin resistance and fertility, how it enhances that. And that is essentially how I ended up trying it on myself. After, of course, I read through all the science and all the articles and all the, testimonials of other people like Maleen creeping the doctor's group. I, I had to see it to believe it. And then I, tested it on myself and maybe a few other family members. And I realized, like I said, not only did I lose a bunch of weight, I became pregnant. I had constant like peeling skin on my hands, which is such a weird thing. I had joint pain in my wrists and elbows. And then of course, puffy hands and ankles, like all of these things started going away. I started feeling energy like I never felt before. I could, think straight. And I thought, holy man, like this is like a miracle. Why aren't more people talking about this? Right. So that's how I stumbled upon it. And then like going through school, we talked about it between the two of us, but like I went to nutrition school, but I still had to write all my papers according to the government recommendations. Wow. Right. I had to turn my brain the other way to write my exam. Like I had to pretend, right? Like that I essentially believed that you should eat a ton of carbs to be healthy.
Wow.
And just supplement with fruits and vegetables. So
wow. Yeah, that's super interesting. I have to do that every 2 years for my nutritional certification. Just have to peruse the book and like go back and think the way I used to think about nutrition so I can pass the test and be a nutrition coach. Like it's the same thing. Yeah. So you asked the question, why aren't more people talking about this? I'm going to throw that question right back onto you. Why don't more people know about this?
I think in the medical industry, at least, like in medical school, we don't learn anything about nutrition or weight loss or anything like that, right? And so there's one paradigm that you learn, and anyone who kind of goes against that paradigm gets cut down, right? There's a lot of resistance to that, and there's a lot of risk, I think, to having this alternate viewpoint. But I think there's a few of us, at least in Canada, who really believe in the benefits of low carb, keto, carnivore fasting. And so we're willing to take that risk because we see how many patients benefit from that, right? Like in my practice, I routinely take people off of diabetes medications, including insulin. And people are always shocked. Like when I was asked them, when you were diagnosed with diabetes, were you given the option to reverse it? And almost inevitably, everyone says no. And so this is just something that we don't know about in medicine. And you're almost regarded as a heretic, I think, if you go against the guidelines and how things are usually done. But I bet you in 30 years or so, low carb will be the standard of care for a treatment of type 2 diabetes and other chronic modern diseases.
I really hope so. I mean, we're starting to collect more data. There's so much anecdote out there, but then also, the ongoing Verta trial and so many good studies that are showing this. I see it all the time. Type 2 diabetics getting off of insulin. And you're right. Like they were just told this is a chronic disease. You're just going to have to manage this for the rest of your life. You guys have both mentioned really interesting, but very consistent with what I've seen, things that changed for you personally. I love that you referred to the weight loss as almost like a side effect. Like there's so many other more powerful things that happen besides the weight loss. In practice, what other interesting things or surprising things have you seen as you've been working with people and changing their diets?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've seen is, people who come in with severe depression that like haven't left their basement in years, and their doctor made them come to our program, and within a few weeks of them sitting there staring at the ground, like all of a sudden they walk into that room and they're wearing like bright pink lipstick, right? And they're confident and they're like this new person. Like I was floored at times. Like we've had people who were walking with walkers for years, and all of a sudden they come in, they're like, you know what, I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and I didn't have to use my walker for the first time in like 7 years.
Wow.
Right?
That's huge. I mean, the other thing in my medical practice is, hey, for the first time, my hunger and my cravings went away, right? And what's the biggest reason why people fail all of these diets is because they're hungry all the time. They're craving all the time. And so, they come in and they're super excited about it. For the first time, I'm not obsessed with food.
Yeah.
It's incredibly freeing.
I completely agree that the satiation feeling, the importance of feeling satiated, we've talked about this on the show a lot in the past. I think most people have zero idea what that actually feels like. I think people know how to feel full. I remember like the last time I had like a chicken salad or something and like my stomach got full, but that feeling 3 hours later, 2 hours later of just being so starving, it's pretty shocking. What tips do you give for people to help get to that feeling of satiation? I think that's so important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, we do a lot of undieting, especially with women. I think we've all been on some sort of a diet since we were teenagers, right? And so we're continually restricting, and we're afraid of food. And so literally what we do is give people permission to eat as much as they need to get that satiation, but you're eating all of the good stuff, right? The stuff that your body actually needs.
Yeah. And I think that, like, it's really like, I always challenge people, and this is very difficult, but, for the next week, try and eat only foods without a label. And if you're going to eat food with a label, do 5 or less ingredients. Come back and tell me how that went.
That's a great tip. That's really good. What kinds of foods tend to give that satiation that you're talking about? All whole foods, but is there some in particular? Eggs, fat, protein. What do you try to lean people towards?
Yeah, we try to get them to prioritize protein. I think pretty much everyone in North America is under eating protein to a large extent, right? And so the priority is on animal protein. And then we use fats as a lever. So in the beginning, to get them off of carbohydrates, they go through a bit of withdrawal and transition symptoms and things like that. And so that's when I will up the healthy fats, the non-inflammatory fats. And then later on, once their hunger and cravings have stabilized, I will back off with some of the fats just so they can burn their own body fat. This is for the weight loss population that I see.
Yeah, I do exactly the same thing. I think that's a great way to think about things. So how did all this get started? Like, why isn't the government on board? Why isn't the medical community on board with this? What happened? How did this get lost in plain sight, basically?
Yeah, I think, like we're still the community, the medical community, the nutrition community, the dietitian community, the government, they still look at fat as bad, right? That hasn't changed. And I think the whole calories in, calories out, there's even a lot of people in like the keto groups and stuff that are still, oh, you just got to eat less calories and you got to exercise more. And, they're not looking at, our bodies as a whole. They're not looking at the hormonal response to foods. Like our hormones don't have receptors for calories. So how do they know, right? And the government is just using that blanket approach. It's not individualized for people's metabolic health. I think that, works initially for the people who are metabolically fit.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take into account people with chronic disease or food addiction or any of those other underlying conditions.
Yeah. And I think one of the big issues is that the medical community views weight as kind of the problem, right?
Yeah.
It's either a reflection of somebody being lazy or they're
weak.
Yeah, they're weak. They don't have enough willpower. There's a lot of judgment in the medical community about weight and weight issues. And I see that when people come in to see me in clinic, they're very apprehensive, right? They think, oh, this is another doctor who's just going to pass judgment on me. But I think what we're in the business of doing is really shifting beliefs about weight, right? So I try to reframe it as weight is really the symptom of something else. And that something else is your high insulin production, which we can fix, right? And we can fix that in a way that doesn't leave you feeling hungry and tired and deprived like all of these other diets do.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to steal a phrase from another Canadian, Dr. Jason Fung, when he talks about blaming the victim. Like, people do feel judged, like they're not following the advice. And an example I would give is like, I'll give you my paddleboard and here's a pool cue and go ahead and, row this paddleboard across the lake. And a person can try and paddle as much as they can for an hour and come back to me as a sweaty mess. And they're like, dude, that was stupid. Like, I couldn't get across the lake. And I would turn around and say, well, you didn't stroke enough. You needed more stroke count per minute. You did it in the wrong technique. You got to do it this way. And that person would clearly realize that's really bad advice. Like, you need a paddle. Yeah. And we do the same thing in nutrition. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally.
So interesting. So we talked a little bit about the government, but what about industry and the kind of food companies? What role do they have in all this mess?
Well, I think they've perpetuated some really big myths out there. Number one that comes to mind is that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? That's just a marketing thing from the cereal companies. So they have a lot of say in our government dietary guidelines and things like that. And I think even the low fat movement, right? They've just dumped a whole pile of sugar into a lot of our food. So most of the food we have right now is not even food. It's food-like products or even drug foods for a lot of people.
Yeah. And they need repeat customers, right? So if you're not a repeat customer, then they'll go under. So, the whole Lay's campaign, I bet you can't just eat one, or I bet you can't just eat one. I couldn't just eat one. Are you kidding?
I couldn't eat just one bag.
I was just going to say that. I had to have 2 different flavors just to mix it up, cleanse the palate. Yeah. So, yeah.
It's pretty shocking. Like, the last time, it's been a few years, but the last time I sat down in front of a bowl of chips and salsa, you're just mindlessly going and going and going, and you hit the bottom of the bag. Like, where did all those chips go?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Exactly.
Huh. Interesting. So the strategy then for, maybe part of the medical system, maybe the food system, is to keep people as sick and alive as they can. Like, if you can live a really long, sick life, that's where they make the most money. Is that correct?
Exactly. And I think a lot of people think this is what is normal, right? They don't realize that they don't have to be sentenced to a lifetime of feeling ill, to a big pharmacy in their medicine cabinet and things like that. People just don't know what is possible. And I think sometimes doctors don't even know what's possible.
We've talked before about the difference between like normal and average. Like, so many people are experiencing all of the same things that you guys were experiencing, puffiness and bloating and, depression, anxiety, all that stuff. So many people are experiencing that everybody just thinks it's normal to just kind of, have the dad bod, age, can't get pregnant, all those things. And that's absolutely not normal. That is average. That's what we've done to ourselves, and you can get out of it. So I really love that advice and that approach. You guys brought something up also, and it keeps recurring. It's coming up quite a bit on our show and with the people we work with. Food addiction. How prevalent truly is food addiction from what you're seeing?
I think it's huge.
Yeah.
At least in my patient population, I screen them for food addiction. And I would say at least 75 to 80% of the patients who present for weight loss have a food addiction.
Wow.
And I think this is kind of where medicine fails people, right? Because we tell people to moderate foods that they just cannot moderate. And so they get stuck in this cycle, right? They eat these foods, they feel sick, they go through this period of guilt and self-loathing, and then they're back on the foods again, right? And so they can't understand this. And I see it a lot in the keto community too. These people, they have profound weight loss, they see the benefits, And they're good for a while, and then they just fall completely off the wagon. And each time they try to get back on track, it gets harder and harder and harder, which is, I think, a reflection of the chronic progressive nature of food addiction. It is a primary brain illness.
Yeah, I think it's also very under-recognized with respect and in comparison to other addictions, right? There's not a lot of education on food addiction. There's not a lot of talk about it. When we do talk about it on social media, we get a ton of private messages from people just saying, hey, like, finally someone's like talking about it, and this is me, right? And there are a ton of people out there who like coach people or help people with food addiction, but there's just not enough noise about it. I think there needs to be more.
You mentioned a screening. What kinds of questions are on that screening? Like, how could a listener, maybe think like, boy, I'm sure connecting with this, and maybe this is a bigger issue in my own life than previously realized? Yeah,
I screen people using the Uncope tool. You can find that online. It's basically a series of 6 questions. And the higher the score, right, the higher the probability that there is a food addiction. There are other tools that you can use to kind of help solidify the diagnosis. Unfortunately, I can't really deliver them in a public healthcare system. They take time, right, and there are extra costs involved in that. But I think most people will kind of see themselves in the story that we put out on social media. And a lot of times they'll come into clinic and be like, hey, when you talked about that on social media, that was me, right? That was me. Can't moderate it at all. Kind of fall into that food coma and just complete loss of control when it comes to this food. And I think the big thing for them is to find them a trigger-free nutrition plan that works for their life.
So what kinds of foods tend to be more problematic, and which foods do not tend to be problematic? I mean, I could see myself getting addicted to certain foods, but not others. You know what I mean?
For sure. Processed foods, Lay's, for example. Carbohydrates are big, but you know what, and Maleen alluded to it a little bit earlier, is these keto groups, for example. There's a ton of people who are keto and they've had great success and they've lost tons of weight, but they're eating a ton of keto processed foods, right? And although I say like a food shouldn't be defined as keto. People always post and say, is this food keto? Well, keto isn't a food. Ketosis is a metabolic state, right? So if that food puts you in a metabolic state of ketosis, right? Like that's different than, these keto cookies, this keto bread, these keto treats. And people who have a food addiction end up over ketofying things, right?
I mean, they're really trying to ketofy their binge foods.
Yeah. And then when those binge foods are not available, guess what happens?
Yeah.
They go down the slippery slope, right? Into those other high sugar, addictive, processed foods.
Drug food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And it's a bummer because sometimes, like, I don't get too I'm sure you guys are the same. I don't get too nitpicky about those things when somebody's just getting started. If that gets you, if a keto donut or whatever gets you off of a conventional donut, that's fine. But it's also, I 100% agree with you. There's so many of those products out there that are screaming that they're keto. And it's just like, look, go eat some eggs or something,
Yeah. And it's hard. Like I always say, when someone's starting out, you can't just ruin their life. But I always say it's the lesser of two evils, right? So I'm going to give you to start the lesser of two evils. This is what I want you to try instead. And then you work towards that, end result where you're having more and more real foods without labels.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, we use it as training wheels, right? I just want you off the sugar and the processed food train. You can have whatever you want in terms of the keto stuff, but you see these people coming in, they've been keto for 3-4 years now, right? The weight has stalled. They've got some inflammation creeping in. It's almost always going to be the artificial sweeteners and the almond flour treats. And then of course they get off of that, right? They go to a more of a whole foods, clean way of eating, and all of those symptoms resolve, right? So.
Wow. Super interesting. You mentioned ketosis, which I would love to talk about. And you also mentioned metabolism. I was fortunate in my career to be using a metabolic cart for most of my career before the pandemic. And it was so obvious when somebody would come in and be on, a low carbohydrate diet, you could tell already what the machine was going to tell you in 20 minutes. You didn't need the machine to tell you that their metabolisms were going to be very high. I've also worked with a ton of people who have done calorie restrictive diets, and you can also just really tell, that person's going to be cold, they're going to be low energy, they probably have some autoimmune going on. But I would love to kind of unpack that a little bit. And can you maybe describe the proper metabolism and why a low carbohydrate or, fasting, carbohydrate restriction, whatever, can actually increase the metabolism?
Yeah, I think if you relate it to calorie restriction, there's always all the diets I was on, it was 1,200 calories or 1,400 or whatever it was, and you'd start out, reducing your calories. And of course it works for a while. But then your body is smart and it adjusts and it lowers its metabolic set point, right? So now all of a sudden you've went from 2,000 calories or more to 1,400, and you're like, oh, I'm not losing weight anymore. What the heck? Okay, I better go down to 1,200 calories. So you go down to 1,200 and you have a little bit more success. And then again, your body says, oh, wait a second. She's changed things. So I'm going to lower the metabolic set point again. And eventually you're just going lower and lower to achieve the same result. It's like we talk about the Biggest Loser all the time. It's the same idea, right?
Right. There's never a reunion show. And they actually did studies of the Biggest Loser contestants, right? And found that they'd lost a tremendous amount of weight with the classic eat less, move more. But their metabolisms they basically tanked, and they didn't recover even 6 to 8 years later.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. There was a study in, I want to say 2016. They were using the same metabolic carts that I used. So interesting.
Yeah. And it goes back to your hormones, right? And your hormones don't have receptors for calories.
Yeah.
So you can eat, Big Mac, that has the same amount of calories as broccoli, and they're both going to affect your body differently. So that just doesn't work.
Yeah. That's so interesting. What surprising things have you learned along the way about plant-based foods and plant-based diets? You mentioned carnivore already. I'm just curious to hear, where do you value plants and plant foods in what you recommend with most people?
Yeah, I mean, this has been the age-old debate amongst weight loss physicians. We can't really agree on what to tell people to eat, even though 90% of weight loss is what you're putting in your mouth, right? And so for me, I want to be recommending something that actually treats the root cause of weight and chronic disease, but it also is nutritionally complete. And I think a plant-based diet has its place. People do well, especially if they're transitioning from a standard and highly processed North American diet, right? But almost inevitably, it's never going to be nutritionally complete. You don't get that heme iron, you lose out on the B12, and so you do have to supplement. And we see a lot of women, young women especially, with a lot of thyroid issues, I think, that stem from that plant-based diet and the lack of heme iron especially. But I think if it's a surefire win if you transition to plant-based from standard North American, for sure, hands down.
Yeah. And I think too, back to how we said, just because it says keto, it doesn't mean it's healthy. Mm-hmm. People are fooled by, vegan, vegetarian marketing. So just because it says vegetarian, it doesn't mean it's healthy. Like you take the Beyond Meat burger, for example, you want to talk less than 5 ingredients, eat a burger, right? Look at the ingredients on the Beyond Meat burger. There's probably 80. Yeah. And most of them you can't pronounce.
Oh, it's insane. It's totally crazy. And I just don't understand why plants are trying to act like meat, run the grass through the cow and then eat the cow. Even the cow's running on fat. It's not running on the carbohydrate from the plant. It's the bacteria that's fermenting it out into short chain fatty acids. So insane. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's so insane. Is it a similar movement in Canada that it is here, that it's really kind of taking off and is still the loudest sounding kind of way of eating is the plant-based way of eating?
Yeah. It's all marketing.
I mean, if you look at the Canada Food Guide, right? It's predominantly plant-based. I think there's a quarter of an egg that you can eat,
Mhm.
and a few bites of meat on that visual guide. It's pretty sad,
A
but it is.
quarter of an egg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
And
do you even do that?
exactly. It was somebody actually calculated it. It was like 300 grams of carbohydrate, I think, per meal in that plate. So yeah, we're kind of on the wrong track, I think, with that.
Wow. Interesting. You guys talking about unforking your relationship with food. Can you unpack that a little bit more? I think that has a lot to do with food addiction as well.
Yeah, I think, you know what, like we've been, again, back to, we've been taught to restrict calories, and that's really what we know. It's ingrained in us. Even when we have people come through our program or the clinic, they don't know how else to do it. And you might have to tell them like 6 times that, you know what, this isn't like a binge restrict type relationship we're going to have. Like we've been there, we've done that. But unforking that relationship is about trusting yourself.
Mhm.
You have to trust in your body again. Like our body is like a supercomputer, right? And we've been for so many years taught to ignore hunger signals. Oh, you're not hungry. You need to lose weight. Just chew some gum or drink some water. You must be thirsty,
Yeah.
right? Go for a walk. So all those things. So we have trained our brains to ignore body signals. So people now, like they're constantly saying, well, what's the portion size on that?
Yes.
Like we'll post a recipe and they'll say, well, what's the portion size? I don't know. Like, did you want to do a complete intake? Right? Like, I don't know anything about you really, but how about you just trust that I'm giving you something good to eat and you eat it until you're full? Do you know what full feels like? Right? So I think it's really like teaching them to trust themselves and not always go by a book,
Yeah.
right? And an app and crunching this and weighing that. Like just eat real food.
Yeah, I think there's such a food frenzy in our society today. I mean, people come in and they're frantic about inputting everything into their app, hitting those macros, hitting that calorie, intake that's suggested, and they're just driving themselves bonkers.
Yeah.
Literally, I want people to just calm down and have that normal relationship with food that your body just self-regulates.
Yeah, calm the fork down.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. What role does mindfulness play in all this? As you're talking about some of this stuff, it kind of strikes me as something that also people have really moved away from as we've evolved, in our fast-paced society. Do you work with mindfulness as well?
Yeah, it's a big part of our transformational program where we work with like upgrading the old operating system in the brain and, like undieting your brain,
Yeah.
not just your body, but teaching them, the tools to not like, not only do this for the 12 weeks that they're in our program or however long they're with us, but beyond that, right? To trust yourself that like, we say we don't want repeat customers like the processed food industry.
Yeah, we're
right?
the worst.
We want to
marketers, right?
set you free and live your life, right?
Yeah.
I love that. I always tell people, like, I really would love for you to fire me in a few months because you are exactly where you needed to be on your journey. We helped you a little bit, but it was you that did the work and you got there and now you get to enjoy your life. I absolutely love that. You alluded to this before as well. But don't you think that kind of conditioning from the outside world it makes it seem so impossible that something this simple could fix so many different things?
Oh yeah, I think people think it's too good to be true, right?
Yeah. How many questions we get about like, like you got to tell me like, what kind of supplements are you using or like how many shakes a day do I have to drink or right? And we're like, none of that.
Like even for the clinic, people think that we're selling something, some sort of a snake oil, and they're like, "Oh, it's probably a big scam." And I'm like, "No, I'm a legit doctor."
Yeah.
Well, I love that. I love that attitude and that message. It's just so great. Tell us about the 12-week program. I'd love to hear what some of the components are in that type of a program.
Well, as I mentioned, we do a lot, like everybody comes to us and they want a meal plan. Like, I feel like that's what everyone's like, just tell me what to eat. That's their first thing. I don't want to know anything else. I just want to know what to eat. So we help them with what to eat, right? We give them tips, how to deal with social situations. And then of course, a big part of it is the mindset and the brain and unwinding all that diet mentality and what they were taught. And like I said, as time goes on, like we are repeating ourselves. And this part of the program, we refer to as our neuronutrition pillar of the program. So we're really working hard with that mindset to just break free from diet prison, essentially.
Yeah, and give you the skills to just live, right? So you don't have to ever worry about weight regain or things like that. You just, you don't need us after 12 weeks.
Wow. So do you do any type of meal plans, or is it more like recipes or like lists of food that people can have?
Yeah, we kind of, like, of course we have meal plans and stuff, but it's not my favorite thing to do because then they don't learn. Like, I think that's part of the problem is, you carry around your healthy plate and, you just fill half of it with vegetables and whatever. Like, we're always referring to something. These are foods. Like I said, try and eat food without a label. Just being conscious of that will change your life, right? Or looking at how many ingredients are on the label, less than 5. But we really just teach them like how to build a meal that, heals insulin resistance. And so that they learn to do it for themselves, because then they can learn to do it for their family. And when they go to an outing or they go to a restaurant, like they can recognize those patterns without having to refer to an app or a meal plan, because then you're stuck at home. So
yeah, wow, that's great approach. I always loved it when I'd be working with somebody and I would hear that like the spouse started doing the same thing and lost a bunch of weight. It would be somebody I would have never even met, but to hear that somebody through the grapevine because of this person was getting such great results was always so cool to hear. I'm sure you guys just love hearing stories like that. What are some of your favorite success stories? You've mentioned a few already, but I want to know if you have any specific ones that you really are really proud of.
All of my success stories that I love, and this is my jam, is people, that we got off of insulin and diabetes medications and high blood pressure medications, and then there's statins, and then at the end of the day, I can tell them, hey, your diabetes is now in remission. So that's been super exciting for me. And of course, you get the little bit of pushback from the endocrinologist and the cardiologist. I don't know why. I think they just get mad because I took their patients off of a bunch of medications, but wow. Love it.
Yeah. And I think, like we've received a lot of testimonials and people who continue to follow us, right? And that, even after being in our program, like they're down even more weight, because like one of our testimonials, she said for the first time in 54 years of her life, she had been dieting since she was 12 years old. She is down 74 pounds and the needle was still moving. And I think she's followed up with Maleen and now she's over 90 pounds. And she hasn't been working with us for a while, but she went through our program and she knows what's what. And she knows how to keep going in the right direction without having us hold her hand.
That's so cool. I love stories like that. We talked a little bit earlier about, making things really simple. Do you find that people have the skills to pull this off? Like even simple things and practical things, like in the kitchen, like how to prepare food. Is that something you also address? Like the simple, like maybe kitchen skills?
Oh yeah. We always tell them to get an air fryer. It's a game changer.
Yes. Yes. Love it.
Yeah. Like you know what? Like Maleen's a physician. I'm a nutritionist. I work full time. I have 2 young kids, like I am the queen of simplifying things. I say this all the time. It's like my claim to fame. Like you want an easy meal, come see me. And an easy meal that tastes good. Like I constantly look at my husband and say, come on, tell me you're suffering. I dare you to tell me you're suffering, right? This is great food. Like who doesn't want to eat this? And you're losing weight and you're resolving health issues, right? So we love simplifying things. We're busy. We don't want to make big elaborate meals. Who wants to do that? So
I did for a long time, just like you guys. Like I remember telling everybody, like, healthy eating is so fun. I love shopping. I love going to the store, 5 times a week. I love buying ingredients and making recipes and spending time cooking. And it's really fun and enjoyable. No, it's not. It's absolutely not. Paddleboarding's fun and riding my bike is fun and spending time with my wife is fun. But like, it's so fun to simplify those things and spend less time doing all of that, throw less food away at the end of the week, right? Like, there's so much more time to go enjoy life. It's great.
I was just going to say that happens when you stop seeing food as entertainment, right? When food just becomes fuel, it becomes so much more simpler.
Yes. Love that. I love that. That's great. What are some of the simple meals that you just really couldn't live without?
Steak.
Yeah. Chicken wings.
Yes. Chicken wings in the air fryer is like, oh my gosh, like my favorite. So good.
Yeah. Like literally I could go on the chicken wing diet, the chicken wing in the air fryer diet. It's a new diet. Yeah. And a lot of our, like, we have what would be called a meal plan, but it's more a recipe compilation. And we, like, keep it simple with not a ton of ingredients. Like we have like what's it called? The
taco pie.
That's
it's a good one.
Wow.
It's a good one. You can have it for several days. The whole family loves it,
That's great. That's so valuable for people if you can make kid-friendly things. And a lot of people think that, kids eat differently and they can't do low carb. Like, I completely disagree with that. I think if kids are, exposed to some of these foods, my guess is they would choose to eat them, but they don't have as much access to those kind of healthy foods and the protein that you mentioned earlier and the fats and all the really good nutrient-dense foods. I think kids would choose that naturally if you gave them the chance.
They do, actually. You know what? Because I'm a scientist by trade, I run experiments on my family. And when my kids were born, I actually watched what they gravitated towards. And I would put the food on the table. And if you put high carb fruit and berries, like if I put a banana and berries, and then I put toast and garlic sausage and cheese, they loved garlic sausage, cheese, and berries.
Wow.
Right. But I don't know, if you guys remember as a kid, your mom would say, but you have to eat your potatoes. You can't get up from the table until you clear what's on your plate, and you didn't eat your potatoes. Right. So we almost forced them into eating this complete government recommended meal.
Yeah.
When they don't need to.
Wow.
They ate their protein and their veggies or their fats. Right. So go play.
That's awesome. Is this the first time on the air that you've revealed that you're doing experiments on your family?
Yeah. Can you edit that out?
It's going to cost you.
Yeah.
One of my favorite kind of pushback things that people tell me that I think is ridiculous is that this way of eating is super expensive. It's really difficult financially to do this type of a diet. What would you say to somebody who told you that?
Yeah, you know what? It's because, as we mentioned in the beginning, they're trying to keto-fy their binge foods.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're not trusting their body and they're not trusting themselves to let themselves know that they're full, right? So in the beginning, they're keto-fying all this stuff with all that expensive food, but in the end, you're eating less.
I mean, the other thing is you're going to save a ton of money in the future because you won't be spending it on medications and diabetes supplies and things like that, right? That's something that you have to take into account as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I love that you guys are talking about keto-fying foods. I've mentioned in the past, it's like a month ago, I was walking through the store and I saw Slim Fast Keto Fat Bombs, and it was $10 for this package. And I lifted it off the shelf and it just floated away into outer space because the net weight was 2.96 ounces.
Wow.
Yeah,
$10.
Exactly. And probably the size of your fingernail.
Oh, yeah, $10. Pure sugar would be keto in those quantities.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
stupid. It's such a bummer. I know we just lost Slim Fast as a potential sponsor of the show, but it is a shame that people are learning about keto, learning about the benefits, which is great, but they think it's in those packages. So I love that you guys are doing the whole foods approach and helping people make it be simple and practical and things like that. I think that's great. So you have your program that people can do. You also have an amazing online tool, which is really like your Instagram account. And I don't know which one of you is 16 years old, but one of you is sufficiently young enough to run an amazing Instagram page with great marketing and really helpful information. Tell me a little bit about the importance of that. I'm just struggling through trying to learn how to do social media, and you guys have it definitely down very well.
There's a lot of doctors in Canada who don't go on social media. It's not a thing, right? Because we have public health care, so people just come to see us, right? I feel like in the States, it's completely different. You see more of the American doctors online, like Tro and who's like carb addiction doc. But I don't know. That's just how we get to reach people, right? Spread the message. I think that was one of the criticisms we got recently. Like, why are you always trying to reach people on social media? Because why not?
Yeah. And remember, Maleen talked about going to design school. She's the 16-year-old behind the fancy feed.
Well, it's really good. And I would answer that question the same way that you just said, like, why are you on social media? Because it's 2021. This is what we have to do. I don't love playing on Instagram all the time, but that's a great way to get the message out. That's where people are going for information. And again, you guys do a great job of that. The pictures of food look great. The pictures of you guys look so badass, and unforking the relationship with food, I think is so cool. What are you guys working on for the future? What things are you kind of trying to build?
Well, we always have a lot going on because our brains go a million miles an hour. But in the next little while, we are essentially launching a new, improved transformational program called the Diet Killer. So it is a Rebel's Guide to Effortless Weight Loss. So we will be accepting applications into that program in the next month or so. And we do have a private Facebook group for women only. Sorry, men. But
that's rude.
So yeah. Sorry. But we do have a private Facebook group where we do some additional training and whatnot. So you can find that through our social media, Rebel Medicine, on Instagram and Facebook.
And in the meantime, Winnipeg, I'm trying to put myself out of business because I want to reverse all of the cases of diabetes and weight gain here, and so that I'm not needed.
I love that. I hope you succeed in putting yourself out of business. Unfortunately, the way the world is going, I think you are going to have lots of business for a very long time. But again, I love the messaging. I love how simple you make it. I'm assuming this is a really great way. This program is a great way to work with people remotely.
Absolutely. We coach women worldwide.
That's awesome. That's so great. Wow, this has been such a fun and interesting conversation. I've loved getting to know both of you. I'm going to ask each of you, what is one simple tip that you would like the listener to walk away from this conversation with today?
I don't have a tip so much as I just want to let people know that they have the power to transform their health with their knife and fork than I do with my prescription pad. That's my message.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. That's great. Awesome. Where can people go to find your work?
Well, they can go to our social media sites. So on Instagram and Facebook, we are Rebel Medicine, and our website is just being transformed right now, but www.rebel-medicine.com.
That's great. We will make sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Maleen Avery and Anna Paulich, Rebel Nutrition, amazing content. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for going out and sharing your information with the world and trying to transform it. You're not doing it in a shisty way. You're not trying to sell a bunch of crap to people. It's really helpful information, and it's great. I'm so grateful for you guys and your work and everything that you do. So thank you so much for all of that, and thank you for appearing today on our show.
Thanks for
so
having
much.
us.
Absolutely. It was a total pleasure. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.